He's back, and I'm glad. Ben Rudolph is back at Life Talks
Let's
today.
just not make this about me anymore. Let's just keep talking. Let's just pretend that we're for old time's sake.
Yeah, if you didn't listen to last week's, then don't start here.
Yeah, go back
to listen to the last episode.
Yeah.
All right.
So our good friend Ben Rudolph, former co-host of Life Talks, who is now transitioning to a new position in Michigan.
Yeah.
To be the director of the world famous Lake Ann camp. He's back with us. We decided to do. We talk politics, we talk sports, we talk everything. Oh, by the way, how about your
Redskins?
Commanders?
My Washington football team.
Your Washington.
Yeah, they are struggling right now.
Yeah,
Struggle
but
bus.
they started
3 losses in a row.
They get your hopes up and then they crush them. Just like the Cowboys.
On Sunday, I hated my football team more than I've ever hated them in a long time.
Oh, it's
it's
such
just
a fair weather fan.
I'm not a fair weather fan. I'm like, why do you do this when you get my hopes up? This is 1996 all over again.
Isn't there a team that's 10-1 now?
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Isn't there a team?
The Kansas City Chiefs?
Isn't there a team that got destroyed by the Buffalo Bills and barely beat the Carolina Panthers? Dan,
they're
barely.
They're paid to entertain, and they just want to keep you there through the whole game.
I mean, you know what was really funny about that game?
Nothing.
Did you watch it?
No, I didn't. I was on a plane or I was taking a nap or something.
I turned it on, and it was like a sea of red in that state. It was at Bank of America.
That was last Sunday. Yeah, I would have been there, except I was preaching. I'm serious. I would have been there. I would have gone down and bought a $5 ticket.
It was
because you can get them now.
Probably 70%. It looked like 70% Chiefs fans at Bank of America Stadium. It was pretty
people here from the Midwest.
Crazy. Anyways, let's talk about
what are we talking? Oh yeah, politics.
What do you want to talk about, Dan? We can talk about anything.
No, what I would like you to say is
we talked about last episode why we think the election turned out the way it did, and really, Trump did things to help him win. Kamala did things to help her lose. But all
right. Well, I want you to put your pastor's hat on for a little bit.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's do it.
So there's two kind of people after an election, and it was interesting to me. It was like somebody popped a balloon, maybe not popped it, but certainly let the air out real quickly. After it was clear
there was an exhale.
There was an exhale. Some people were holding their breath a little bit, but like, what's he going to do? Because the inflammatory extreme language that was used by both sides, the end of democracy, the end of morality, all that's over now. But you don't go through what this country's been through for the last several years even without there being some trauma. So you are an expert in coaching, counseling people with trauma. What would you say to both sides? What would you say to the person who's saying, thank God our country's free and safe again for 4 years? And what would you say to the person who's saying, I'm leaving on a jet plane, gonna go with Ellen DeGeneres. First of all, that song? That was a 60s
yes,
song.
Yes, I do know that song.
I'm like a veritable 60s catalog.
I knew. Did you start singing show tunes or something since I left? Is this a new thing?
No, this is a new thing.
My wife is trying to get me to see Wicked, so maybe this is it.
It's so good. It's so good.
I will not see Wicked till I've seen Gladiator.
I saw Gladiator too.
Oh, you did?
Yes, it was good, but Wicked's better.
Okay. First of all,
not the movie. Well, I'm sorry. I haven't seen the movie. I saw the actual musical. Wicked.
Okay. That's what I
mean. I haven't seen the movie.
Here's my man card.
No, I think you're a good husband that takes your wife to see
and my daughter.
Shows.
That's right.
Yeah, I did. That's exactly what I did.
All right, let me back up. You said I'm an expert. I'm not an expert, but I'm more knowledgeable than probably the average Joe.
You're experter than me.
Okay. So I think one of the constant things that the Word of God brings us back to is perspective and context. Okay, so the perspective is that there are some bigger principles that we have to hold on to, no matter who wins. Like there's a sense of, okay, I can't get too, because right now you have this. It's, again, listening to the podcast, when you listen to conservatives, it's like there's this abundance of joy, just this brashness, almost cocky arrogance that you're like, oh my gosh, this is
ugly.
Yeah, it's just not appealing to listen to, right?
It's not Christ-like. It's not Christ-like.
That's a good.
And on the left, you have this kind of this doomsday. It's either doomsday or it's denialism. They're in denial. Like, we just, whatever. And so I think those are kind of the worldly ways to approach when you don't, quote unquote, win. I think the problem is, as a Christian, you didn't win and you didn't lose on November 6th. Winning and losing had nothing to do with you and your faith and you as a person and you as a follower of Jesus Christ. Okay. Now we can talk about what happens to our nation, what happens to the economic system, what happens to the world, the globe. Like, you can have those kind of geopolitical conversations and what's good, what's bad. You can have economic conversations, what's good, what's bad. But as a Christian, when you are tying yourself very closely to tying your joy or either tying your sorrow to political events, I think you have to just kind of, the perspective is, okay, I have to believe that God is still on the throne, God is still working, and the mission of God takes precedence. I think one of the things that you talked about, the exhale, and I felt that too. And I wonder if the exhale was more about that there's this almost like, at least it's not a contested election. I wonder if the exhale was that.
I think a lot of it was. I think I want to give gentle pushback on part of that, though, which is that I think that some sorrow that people were experiencing, myself included, was justifiable and not going against kind of God being on mission. Because part of my sorrow was thinking about real flesh and blood people made in God's image who might experience significant harm. As a result of this.
So let me just say this. I'm not saying you can't have an emotional response to it.
Yeah.
I want to step away. What I'm saying is, don't go into the ditch of despair. Don't go into the ditch of like this idea of victory.
Yeah.
Like what was won from a Christian perspective? What was won? Nothing was won. Okay. But yeah, like when you listen to, and I was listening to a Middle of the Road podcast, and they are talking about pastors in certain cities that now their congregations, born again believers, are worried about being ripped from their homes and taken. And again, you can have your perspective on immigration. I'm not saying you can't, but I think as a follower of Jesus, you've got brothers and sisters in Christ who are in this country that are going to bed tonight and they are scared. How would you, just as a Christian, comfort them?
And you're not going to be able to do that unless you can have a hope of understanding where they're coming from. And I think I imagine there are excuse me. I imagine there are a lot of white Christians that literally cannot imagine what it would be like to go to bed and thinking that at some point between January and April, I might have federal agents at the door and forcing me to go,
yes. So
not only can't they, this is the thing that concerns me. They don't want to. This is what concerns me. When you can look into the face of someone who's frightened or hurting or whatever and not feel compassion, that to me says we've got a spiritual problem deep within it that we have to address.
And again, when I bring up this situation, I am not saying we shouldn't kick out criminals and gang members. I'm not saying
that we should have open borders.
I'm not saying we should have open borders. I think one of the tragedies of the Biden administration was allowing the border to get so chaotic and to realize. I mean, the human trafficking, the sexual exploitation, like it was
fentanyl.
It was horrible. I'm not saying like I'm not against closing the borders. I'm not against some kind of immigration reform or policy. I'm just saying the incarnational reality of certain policies are going to affect people that we're going to be worshiping with Jesus in heaven one day.
Yeah.
And if you're oblivious to that, or at least are callous to that, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And so I think at least what I would say is the perspective is remove yourself from this sense of I've won or we've won or they lost or whatever it is. And you have to realize, okay, there are certain things that I think Christians can celebrate, and I think there's certain things that Christians should probably be concerned about.
Yes.
Okay, I think the celebration part of Christians is I think that there's not going to be as much pressure to like when Kamala Harris said, I don't care if you're a Christian doctor, you're going to be forced to perform an abortion. I don't think that's right. Okay. I think there's some government overreach into those kinds of social issues that I think Christians should be thankful for.
Yeah.
Okay. That's going to stop. I don't think it's going to stop for very long. I just think it's right now.
We have a reprieve.
We have a reprieve for a season. But at the same time, I think some of the immigration issues of deporting, and again, I'm not saying we shouldn't get rid of criminals and it's an emotional issue, but I think you have to realize there are image bearers, your brothers and sisters in Christ, people that really do contribute in a positive way to the American culture. The reason why they're not citizens is because we have a broken immigration system, okay? And I think we've got to get both parties to the table to figure out how to provide pathway to citizenship. We have people in our own church, Dan, right, who are struggling with this process right now.
Exactly.
Right? And we love these people. We would not want to lose them from our church family, okay? That's how I feel. I pray to God that they can figure out something to do with people who are here, quote unquote, illegally, but man, they're serving, they're contributing, they're not a drag on the American culture society, right? Like, so I think that we can be concerned, we can be, we can be thankful.
That's where I go back to our values and principles from a biblical worldview have to be secondary to our political inclinations and motivations, which is, I feel like the evangelical church has lost a lot of that.
Yeah.
And okay, so I understand elections are bare-knuckled, knock them down, you got to win. But the day after the election, it's like, and I know some of it's staged, and I know some of it's not sincere, but I actually like it whenever at the end of the Super Bowl, you look down there, sometimes they'll pan the camera down and both teams are in the end zone praying.
Right, right.
I would love it if there was enough reasonableness, instead of looking to the next election, that Washington could come together and say, what are we going to do with the dreamers? What are we going to do with the people that were genuinely running for their lives? And can we not find some common middle ground? Again, like you said, send the criminals back home. Send the fentanyl runners back home.
Yeah.
But if we're going to be about winning the next election or executing revenge on our opponents for the things they did in the previous administration, then we're lost, because then we just go from one extreme to the other, and it becomes about brute power.
What I'm hopeful, not hopeful, I shouldn't say I'm hopeful. What I hope and pray for is that it does not turn into a revenge tour. I think, and I think time will tell. Like, I think that's I think as Christians, we don't want. I think as much as, and we talked about this before the election, the Democrats were so foolish to go after Trump in some of these, like they turned him into a victim. And I'm not saying he didn't do anything wrong.
And into a martyr.
They turned him into it's hard to turn him into a victim, but they found a way to do it, right? And it's like, just don't, because and here's what will happen if Trump starts going after his political opponents. He's asking for a bloodbath in the midterms. He better understand Americans want you to move on. Just move on, because I think, again, and this is a discipleship thing. What the election proved once again was that the God of America is money.
Yeah.
That's what this election proved. 100%. Okay. And so, you've got conservative values, social values, you have liberal social values, and those can maybe influence percentages here and there. But by and large, people are always going to vote what's happening with my bank account. And
the theme song of Donald Trump's reality TV show was money, 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 money.
Yeah. So I think what it teaches us is the things that Americans said, I will never vote for a candidate who does this. Well, it's been proven that Christians 12 years ago or 10 years ago or however many years ago for generations said, I will never vote for a candidate who does this or who's said this, or they have. And why did they? Predominantly is because he's better for my pocketbook. Okay, so I think the discipleship issue here is, do I love money more than I love God. And I'm not saying that in a way like you wouldn't have voted for, Trump or anything like that. What I'm saying is there has to be some level of checking. This should help us to understand not just our own hearts, but our neighbors' hearts. Understanding that there's a love of materialism. There's a love of money that just permeates the American culture. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And I think we've got to be willing to talk about those acceptable idols if we're going to be faithful witnesses to Jesus today.
Yeah, and I think the evangelical church needs to do a lot of self-examination because we very piously wanted Clinton impeached. He was an immoral man,
right?
And so now we fast forward 22 years, whatever years later, more than that, 32 years later, and our response is, yeah, he's an immoral man, but he helps my pocketbook. That tells a lot about our own progression.
And he'll own my enemy.
But that's been going on. One of the reasons why the Democrats wanted to impeach a president, and they've been talking about it ever since, is because the Republicans impeached their president.
Right.
And it's tit for tat, and it keeps going back and forth. And now, they tried to do it with Biden. If they controlled,
they really worked to do that. I mean, so that's what you're hoping is
somebody's got to be a grown up and say, let's stop. Let's be a statesman. Let's stop.
I'm praying to God that whatever counselors that Trump listens to will convince him, don't turn the DOJ to your own personal revenge. Like even if you feel like that they did that to you, don't do that.
I mean, the fact that he nominated Matt Gaetz as Attorney General, even though
that was disturbing.
Even though he stepped back. I mean, I think because there were a lot of people right around the election who were like, a lot is going to come down. I was listening to a bunch of the same podcasts you were too. And people kind of like, we'll see what happens with the cabinet picks. Hopefully, maybe he will go to his better angels and he'll just bring on, and when he brought on people like Rubio, I was like, okay, maybe it's kind of like a normie Republican. Yeah. But when you put up Matt Gaetz, when you put up RFK Jr. for health and human services, some of the other kind of colorful characters, that's at least a bad indication of, for those of us who are hoping that even though it was like his top 5 things he was saying in speeches about how he's going to do political retribution on his enemies, we're hoping like maybe he won't do that. Matt Gaetz as Attorney General kind of feels like that signals a bad thing there.
Yeah. And that's why I love our system of government. And as soon as they nominated Gaetz, I sent both our Republican senators a message on Twitter and said, please don't.
I think here's the thing. I mean, I had conversations with my very conservative friends who were cheering Gaetz because of the revenge issue, and then they would those rhino swamp dwelling, they better not block him. That's their job. Their job is to provide sanity. Matt Gaetz is one of the most
polarizing.
That's a nice way of putting it. Like, I didn't like him even before. Like, if you follow politics at all, you realize like there's certain people you're just like, I don't like that guy.
Yeah.
He was the most unpopular congressional person before. Like, I'm just wondering, like, what was he thinking? What was Trump thinking by nominating him? Because his own party hates him. He wouldn't have gotten. I think he probably would have gotten 24 votes if it went to a vote.
Yeah, and of course, one of our favorite parlor games is what's Trump up to? Was this a plan? Was it?
I don't.
But the issue is, if you do not have a biblical worldview, if you don't have a foundation that's based on truth, if you have become a political pragmatist where the end justifies the means, regardless of what you say you really believe, then this is a time for the evangelical church to double down on their philosophy, on what they really believe. And I believe we need a time of honesty in the evangelical church that ask ourselves, where is our faith really based? And what is our philosophy genuinely founded on?
So can I say something that I remember hearing from some pro-life advocates? This is probably 10 years ago. And Josh, you probably are familiar with this, but they went back, I think, from the 80s all the way to the present. I think it was this was probably sometime during the beginning of Obama's presidency. And I remember these pro-life showed a chart of abortions, and they showed when Republicans are presidents, the abortions went up, and when Democrats are presidents, the abortions went down.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. I think what's weird is that abortions were going basically down with every president until Trump. And that's the first time the abortion rate went back up, and at least since like the 90s or something like that.
Okay,
I'm pretty sure.
One of the, again, they just show this chart, but one of the things that they said is they believe that one of the reasons why you see a spike when it's a Republican is because they believe that church stops praying. That was their theory. Their theory was when Republicans get elected, Christians stop praying as much, like, oh no, like we need to really seek God because our person's not in the
It could be that, but they also feel more comfortable when they feel like that their person's in the White House. And when you've got someone who has literally told the church, vote for me and you'll never have to vote again, they're feeling really comfortable right now. And that for some of us pro-life leaders is a concern.
Yeah.
Because we can't do this if y'all think that victory happened, in November and we can just move on, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think what would my posture been on these podcasts had their election gone the other way? And I was, thinking about that as I was driving here this morning. And one of the things is I would have been calling the church to action, to not give up hope, not to despair, don't move away, and all this kind of silliness. And don't stop engaging with people who think differently. Go to your Christmas dinners with the people you're family with, but at the same time, gird your loins. Be ready to give an answer for the hope that lies within you. And I thought, as I was driving, I said, well, if I would have said that the way the election might have turned out, I ought to believe that the way the election did turn out.
Yes, exactly.
We cannot be weary in well-doing. We cannot be complacent. And our hope ought to never be in politics.
I think that's my concern is that if it's true that 85% of evangelicals voted for Trump, which I think they did, I think it's pretty consistent, right? I think there can be a complacency on Christians' part to just, and just kind of let things happen as opposed to staying engaged, as opposed to continuing to pray. I think that's really important. Yeah,
the thing I think is important is, Josh, you remember when Reagan was president, right?
Oh, yeah, totally.
You do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you don't remember a thing about it, do you?
I've been to the museum.
That is it, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember when Nixon was in?
No, I was born in 76.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I do, but most people on the stage today don't.
Yeah.
And they're not going to remember when Trump is in 40 or 50 years. But you know who they will remember? Jesus Christ.
That's right.
They are going to remember the things that are important, the truth. That name is never going to go away in all of human history. Yeah. And so we've got to make sure that our hope remains in the things that do matter and He who is eternal. And again, I know sometimes it sounds just, obnoxiously cliche, but it's a truth statement. And a truth statement is true regardless of, all the baggage that it accumulates and so forth. It's still true. And when the thing about it is when you anchor yourself to truth statements, there is security to it. And it allows you to go through, I used to say this, and I think I kind of meant it. I think I still do kind of mean it. I would like to be at some point in my life, I don't want to die for my faith, but I wouldn't mind suffering a little bit just to prove to myself how real this is to me. And so there was kind of this thing like, maybe I will go to prison someday. I'd love to stand up for Jesus. But the bottom line is I have an opportunity to stand up for Jesus every single day. I don't need to go to prison to do that.
Yeah.
And I can do that in conversations, and I can do it with kindness and courtesy and with love and compassion, and I can listen and I can redirect. And I hope that's what all of our listeners do, whether you're celebrating or you're depressed, whether you're wait and see, or whether you've been looking at property in Canada. Let's step back. And let's make sure that we're thinking biblically in all things. As always, Ben, thank you for coming back. Man, I love yakking with you.
We got one more episode to go.
We got one more episode.
Not about politics.
No, we're done with politics probably for another couple years.
Some of your predictions were political. So there's going to be a little bit.
I forgot about that.
There's going to be a little bit, but it won't take long.
So you won't want to miss our next episode as we go to our end of the year episode where we see if our predictions were true. And California Psychics is not calling Dan. I'm just telling you that right now. Thank you so much for listening to us here at Life Talks. Please share your thoughts and comments and questions with us at lifetalks@lifecharlotte.com. Until next time, thanks as always for joining us here at Life Talks.